Hey y'all, it's Steve, Hobo with Wood, and in this video we're going to talk about resizing slots and tabs. And we're going to do that a couple of different ways. I'm going to show you how I understand LightBurn's tool works. They have a new tool, if you're not aware, in version 1.3 that came out, showing you or that allows you to resize slots and tabs. There are other ways you can do that, and I'm going to show you another way that I do it that may come into play in certain circumstances to where the tool is not that friendly of a tool for your design. So hang around. You're going to want to watch both of these methods, and I'm sure there's others, but these are just two, and you're going to want to see both of them. This is going to be a couple of ways to accomplish the same end result. And as you probably already know, there are dozens of ways to accomplish the same thing within LightBurn. There's not really any wrong way to get to the same end result. If you both get to the same point at the end, whether or not you took 5 steps or he's able to do it in 2 steps, does it really matter? It's about your comfort level, understanding how to work within the software, and then also how to manipulate the things the way you want them to, and not surrendering complete control to the software, or when the software is going to give you an end result that you're not satisfied with, how you can manipulate it yourself within the parameters of LightBurn, but not using their tool. First, let's talk about why you need to resize slots and tabs. Any design that you bring in from a cut and design application, you import that you didn't design yourself, you're going to have to make it fit your material. It was designed with a certain size of material in mind, and they don't always tell you when you're buying this graphic from someone that, hey, this was set up for and designed specifically for 3.3 millimeter wood. Well, if you've got 3.5 or 4.5 millimeter, well, that's not going to work, or it's not going to work well. So you're going to need to know how to determine what it was originally set up for, if they're not going to tell you, and then how to make it work with what you've got. And 2, when you do get my programs or my cut files, on a lot of things are going to be on the new YouTube channel, youtube.com/LaserMakersRealm. I will tell you what it was designed for, but if you need to make those changes, this is what you're going to need to know to make those changes fit for you. And I'd rather go over that here on Hobo with Wood than waste any time on Laser Maker's Realm on these how-tos. Laser Maker's Realm is all about free files and free projects, and it's going to be a great source to get some fun projects without a whole lot of this. You know, that's what this channel is for. Get your fill of me here, and let's have fun on Laser Maker's Realm. So let's bring in a template that I'll be sharing in Laser Maker's Realm. This is a bookmark. A bookmark, you say? Yes, a bookmark. And I designed this using 4.9 millimeter wood. So if you don't have 4.9 millimeter wood, or you don't want to go get any 4.9 millimeter wood because you've got a whole stack of 3.3 millimeter sitting over there, how do you make those slots work with your wood? Well, it's not that difficult. First, I'm going to show you LightBurn's way. Now, I'm using LightBurn 1.3.01, so if you haven't upgraded to that, or if this is an old video at this time and now it's outdated, now you know why. I'm on 1.3.01 at this time. Because I've already told you it's 4.9, you don't have to go and look to see what that slot size is. So if you go up here to Tools, come down here, next to the bottom, Resize Slots in Selection. it brings you up the menu. Put in your old material thickness, it's 4.9. The new material thickness is going to be 3.3. We'll give it a tolerance of 0.1. And we want to look at slot width. Well, it's not selecting anything, and if you're reading down here, the next line tells you why. Your selection contains the following unsupported items: grouped shapes. Now here's where I begin to have a little bit of a frustration with the fact that this won't work with grouped shapes. My living hinges here are grouped shapes within other grouped shapes, and I don't like taking it all the way down to the point that we're going to have to in order for this to work, because living hinges are very precisely placed, and I almost inevitably every time am trying to either just click to select a project or a piece within a project, I'll accidentally move it while I'm selecting it. And if it's a single slot or a single line, I may not detect that movement, and it might not be that much, but it could be enough to affect the fitment or the flexibility of a part, and now the whole part's ruined. But in order for this to work, everything has to be ungrouped. And I think the reason for that is when everything is grouped, or you have a group, right now this project consists of 2 end pieces, the outer perimeter, all those slots, all of those lines to create the living hinge. There's, I don't know, 100 or more things there. But LightBurn sees one item. It sees one thing. It doesn't see all of the pieces that went together, the layers to make that. And I don't think it has the ability to see those. So if we hit ungroup once, it's now 2 groups. That's a group along with this group of the main body. That's still not far enough. So we're going to continue to ungroup down to each individual piece. So now, too far. There you can see one slot. And now you can see in your material, your dimensions up there, your width is 4.9 millimeters. That's the thickness of the wood that this was designed for. So if you got a file you've got from someone, you find your individual slot width, and that's the wood that it was designed to be used with. Now we need to change that from 4.9 to 3.3. Well, now that we've got everything broken down and individualized, if we select the entire piece and come back to that same tool, Resize Slots and Selection, it's now, you see the highlighted segments are what it's looking to adjust. There is your slot depth. There's your slot width. And then lastly, your tab height. So right now we're going to work with strictly the slot width. Now, if you look down here, it's still giving you a warning. It says your selection contains the following unsupported items: shapes that are not closed. Now it's no longer worrying about the groups because we've gotten rid of all of them. But the living hinge are individual lines. They are not a closed shape. So it's telling you, hey, you've got shapes in here that aren't closed. Well, it's not going to recognize those, and it shouldn't acknowledge it. And it shouldn't, since it is seeing all of our slots, and that's the only thing we're really looking to change, that should be irrelevant. It's just telling you, hey, just in case you weren't aware, you've got some unclosed shapes here. But now, we're going to change our material thickness from 4.9 to 3.3. And if you look here at your segments of that slot, the blue segments, those are the highlighted pieces, and your arrows show you the movement in which they're going to travel. So here, for instance, we're going from 4.9. Let's say we wanted to go to, for whatever reason, we're going to go to a 10 millimeters or a centimeter thick material. So you've got a CO2, and now you're going to be cutting out a thicker material. It's the same segments that are highlighted, but now they're going larger. So that's how you can make those slots bigger. So it's not just about reducing them. This is just changing the size. And it's going to depend, obviously, are you going thicker or wider, and it's going to move them accordingly. But we're going 3.3 millimeters, so it's going to bring it in and tell it OK. And now it just changed every single slot within that total group to 3.3 millimeters. Now, with everything still selected, without having to select it again, all you got to do is hit Tools, Resize Slots and Shapes. This time we want to change our tabs. And if we look at these options, bring this here, those options right now, it shows slot depth. I'm trying to configure this to where we can see it best. There we go. And then slot width, or not width, slot tab height and slot depth. Now these are going to, this would accomplish some of the same thing, but not 100%. We're going from 4.9 to 3.3, and this is showing you the segments that are moving. So it's moving these three pieces here outward to a depth of 3.3 millimeters. But if you choose slot depth here, you notice it didn't change this out here. That's still going to be on this piece, 4.9 millimeters, and the perimeter is not going to end up matching with your outer piece as you wrap it together. That's not going to work. You need to change your tab height. Now you see that it's selected the outermost segments, and it's going to bring those in down to the 3.3 length, and that is what's going to make everything marry up and look best. So, okay. Now, another thing I mentioned, it mentions here your tolerance. So before I make any changes here, I want to show you something. This is my original design, and if you look at your ruler and we look at each of these individual segments here, this segment, it shows you is 4.83 millimeters. It's not 4.9. That one's 4.84. That one's 4.84. That one's 4.85. 4.85. The next one's going to be like 4.87. So in order for me to get those, when I was building and designing this, and when I was rotating them, I had to do a little tweaking to marry everything together. So that's why it gives you the ability to select a tolerance. So when you're working with someone else's file or even your own, and you've there may be inconsistencies with those links or those tabs, and in this case here I did have a small variance. This would be a way when you're designing that you could actually clean that up to make everything uniform, or you just don't know what they might have encountered if it's someone else's file. So here we've told it 4.9, and it's got a tolerance of a 0.1 in there. Well, we just seen that it was 4.8. If we took that tolerance out and put it to 0, look, it didn't see anything. They're all gone because we didn't give it enough tolerance. If we just give it a 0.1, then it's going to see everything. But if it's a 0.01, it's not seeing them all. So if you run into a case where you're trying to resize your tabs, you're like, wait a minute, that's not all the tabs. Well, you may have to change that tolerance level a little bit to where you can get it to where you're going to pick up everything. Or if you're designing your own, and I've just showed you in my design, it was 4.8 and change. Well, let's do this. Right now, I'm telling it the old material is 4.9, and I'm going to give it a tolerance of that 0.1 that we started with, and say OK. And actually, I'm going to change it to the new material is 4.9. So this is how you would clean up your design. If you wanted to make sure everything was perfect, tell it you're going to change it to 4.9 and say OK. And now where I just showed you a minute ago that was 4.8, look at your ruler now and look at that segment. It is now exactly 4.9. All right, so that's how you could use this tool to help you clean up your specifications, your measurements. But let's say we need to change that to 3.3. So we've got select them all, and we're going to change our tab height to 3.3. And OK. So now we've changed our slots, we've changed our tabs, so that is ready to cut. Now, everything is individual. You know, the slots are individual, the hinges, and I'm being exaggerating, but like I said, I will, when I try to select an object, sometimes if I try to select that individual, I may just bump it a little, change the dimension of it, change the width, or change its location. I don't always see that. That's why I hate not having those grouped, because when I move a group, I'm more likely to see that whole column of slots shift than I am just that little tweak of one individual piece. So let me show you what I do. Cancel. I make mistakes. That's what I do. All right, add the graphic. And let's put her center of the table. Go into tight. All right. Now, I'm still going to have to break these up a little bit. I'm going to be using that same tool to change my tab height. But what I do for my slots, and where this also is going to come into potential play, is whenever you're going to go from, someone asked me about how to change from a thinner slot to accommodate a larger slot. And if you're going to go too large and you're so close to the perimeter that now it's going to change that, how can you move all those and keep that from distorting your project? Well, this is how I do that. I use my anchor points. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to ungroup this to get it down to the columns. So one ungroup is going to put it in the sides in the whole piece. One more ungroup gives me my both columns of slots, and ungroup those, and now that gives me individual columns on my slots, but my hinges and my perimeter are all still grouped together, and I can't move those without it being obvious. Okay, now you undo a easy save. Same thing with my slots. If I accidentally move it, well, that's not going to be a movement that you miss. So you can just easily undo it. All right, but now how do I change these slots to be the 3.3 that I want? Real simple. I've got that column selected, and I'm going to want to keep this distance the same. I don't want that to change. Using their tool, it was using a center anchor point and drawing everything into the center of that slot. Remember, the arrows are pointing to each other on both sides, so it was getting narrower on both sides of the slot, which was going to increase the gap from the perimeter. So for whatever reason, your design was very particular and you couldn't increase that design or that gap, or you didn't want to. You wanted to keep it positioned in relation to the outside piece. Well, you do that by using anchor points and just moving the whole column. I'm going to come up here to the corner where you can see this is where it's in relation to the edge of the material. We know it's 4.9 millimeters. Make sure your aspect ratio is unlocked, and you want to use your anchor point on the left side, because we're working with this left column of slots on our design, and we want to bring everything to the left. We don't want that left side to shift inward. So move to the anchor point to the left side, and it really doesn't matter if you use the left center or the left top or bottom, because we're changing the overall width, and it's not going to affect top, bottom, or middle. But I will, to make sure, I use that left center anchor point to draw everything to the center. Now, if you were changing your height, it would definitely matter if you use the top, bottom, or middle. But just stay with the middle, and you're going to be okay. So left middle anchor point, and we're going to change it to 3.3 millimeters. And what that's going to do is it just shifted everything in to a 3.3 millimeter slot and did not move that outer line in relation to the perimeter of the outer piece. And we do the same thing to the right side. I've selected that whole column of slots, Make sure your aspect ratio is unlocked. You're going to move it 3.3 millimeters, but you're going to move it. Well, you got to select that anchor point first. So undo. Now you got the right anchor point and 3.3, and there, everything shifted to the inside, or to the right side. Now, all those slots are ready down to 3.3 and ready to go. You'd still use the same method on these. They would have to be ungrouped, and make sure resize that you do your tab height, and you're going from 4.9 to 3.3, and okay. So now those are edited to 3.3 and ready to go. Okay, so I had someone ask me about a project that they had already, and they had the small slots in it, and they want to go to a bigger material. How do you do that? Well, I showed you, even using their tool, that you can select those and go larger. You don't have to, it's not just for reducing, it's changing shapes or sizes of slots and tabs. But where you can run into a problem using their tool, let's say this design was originally designed using 3.3 millimeter slots like we have here, and it was positioned to where it was out here closer to the edge. And now you want to take this design and make it out of thicker material. Well, when you use the tool in LightBurn, when you use this option to resize slots in selection, when it changes, if you remember when I showed you those segments a second ago, it had arrows on both segments, be it moving inward or moving outward. It's moving either to the center or from the center. And that's what I refer to the anchor point. They are moving from the center anchor point. Regardless which direction you go, they are making that edit from the center anchor point. Well, here, if we select this column and we go to the center anchor point, and we're going to go from 3.3 millimeter wood, and let's say you're using a CO2 and you're doing 10 millimeter wood. Well, when you put in 10 millimeters, look at what happened to the edge of your material. Your slot just expanded out past the edge of your material. That's not going to work. And that's what their resizing tool will do. Now, you could take that and then grab all your slots and move them over, but in order to do that, you've got to regroup them all, and it's more work to do theirs than it is just to do my way. And what I would do here is, if we undo that, we go back, we've got 3.3 millimeter wood or slots, and think of your anchor points. I've used this analogy in the video for anchor points, my explanation of them, and contrary to some comments, this is what they do. It has nothing to do with where your laser starts. This is the anchor point of that design when you're making modifications to that particular either group of shapes or individual shape. If you think of, if this was a boat, if this rectangular shape here was a boat, and you threw an anchor overboard and you drop anchor right there, well, that's the fixed position. The current would be your modifications that you're making to it. Well, the current and the water can move your boat all over the place, but that anchor is not going to deviate. Well, same thing with when you're making modifications here. You drop anchor on your shape, be it in this top right corner or the top left corner or the bottom left corner, whatever. When you drop anchor there, any modifications you do are going to happen around that anchor, or either to it or away from it. But that's not going to move. So here we have 3.3 millimeter wood that's really close to the edge of this, and we want to start using say 6.6 millimeter wood. We don't want this outer edge to move. So drop anchor again on that right side, just like we did before when we were changing. Drop that right side and go to 6.6. Go to 10 like we just said a second ago. 10 millimeters. And see, it all moves to the inside. None of that was shifted to the outside edge. So now you're not going to have to go reposition all the slots. You just change the slot from an anchor point. Does that make sense? Is it a head scratcher? And it's the same thing on the other side. If this was over here, and we've got to move it closer to make it exaggerated, but here though, because we're on the left side, you're going to drop anchor on that left part and now change it to 10 millimeters. And now it all moved to the inside. So try to think of it as an anchor point, and you're anchoring that shape at whatever point you're going to want those changes to take place from. Wherever you drop anchor, that's not moving, the rest of it will. Hope that makes sense. So this has been my second take on trying to explain my method for resizing slots and shapes, or slots and tabs, because the first time I screwed up and didn't include the tabs. And a viewer was kind enough to, hey, don't we need to do tabs? Yes, I messed up. And because of his thankful and greatly appreciated comment, I'm thankful for having it, that, hey, don't we need to do that? I was able to get that video down, make this correction, and to show my appreciation for that, I'm sending him a nice, check out my wood, Hobo with Wood t-shirt. And I addressed another comment about how to go from a small set of slots to a larger one there, both using their tool and also using my method, so that when their tool is not as friendly, design friendly. So I really am appreciative of the feedback I get from your comments. It lets me know that you appreciate these videos, that you are taking something away from it, and you let me know when I have screwed up. And when you can share with me a better way to do something, I greatly appreciate it. I have learned a lot from the comments. The select all feature whenever you go to cut, man, I have used the snot out of that ever since I made a whole 20-minute video explaining how I was able to correct something. They said, you could have done the same thing by just choosing select all. Well, I sent him a t-shirt too. But golly, that. In fact, I'll use now select all on any jobs I do. I select what I want and send it to the printer. That is my default. So I learned from your feedback. Some of the comments that are like, hey man, that's not an octagon, that's pentagon. Yeah, I know my different shapes, but you got to remember, I'm a stroke victim, and the wires don't always cross correctly, and things aren't always firing on 8 cylinders. Those aren't helpful comments. I don't care. So what? I called it by the wrong name. But if you can help me with a technique, by all means, correct me whenever I make an error. I hope you genuinely appreciate these videos. I enjoy making them. I have taken the advice of others, and I did go ahead and launch my Patreon page. So I now have a Patreon account, so that if you want to log in and help support me as I'm learning and I'm helping to teach, it'll be greatly appreciated. My plan initially was I was going to offer my files as an incentive to sign up for Patreon. Well, turns out I'm now giving away those files on YouTube at Laser Maker's Realm. I'm giving them away. I'm not selling them. I was going to do that as an incentive to sign up. Well, now that I'm giving them away, I don't really have anything at this point other than what I'm doing right now also for you for free. So if you want to show me some support, it would be greatly appreciated. I've been, for the last 6 months, learning a lot and sharing what I've learned with you. It would be greatly appreciated, any support. And I do go over to Laser Maker's Realm, YouTube at Laser Maker Realm. Look for those. We're going to launch that channel officially 1st of January. It is going to be growing slowly, but everything there is all about free projects. And there's 3 different contributors to that channel. Myself, Rich, the Louisiana hobby guy, Patrick from Light Source Everything. And you're going to have 3 different... Patrick's got a variety of lasers that I don't have. So his projects are going to be, a lot of times, might be capability of things that I can't do. So it's not going to be just, this. And Rich, the Louisiana hobby guy, he's got years of experience and lots of ideas and projects. So you're going to get a really a hodgepodge of projects on there. So it's going to be a fun channel. So until the next video, and my next video I put out is going to be a review on the Comgrow Z1 10 watt. I've replaced my diode. I've got a CO2. Things are really starting to look up in here in the laser shop. And I appreciate everybody's subscribing. I appreciate you watching. And until the next video, this is Hobo, Steve, Hobo with Wood, and I'm out.